Hello and welcome to another episode of My Favourite Game from the Honest Football Podcast, where we bring honesty back to the beautiful game. I'm Charlie Betts, and joining me this week is Eleanor Lee. Eleanor is a journalist for Sky Sports News and for Give Me Sport. We have a good chat about the impact of Give Me Sport, and particularly in the women's game, which her organisation and her colleagues are a massive, massive pioneer for. She's also a huge Liverpool fan, which features in her My Favourite Game episode later on. If you want to keep in contact with Eleanor and what she's doing, particularly with regards to women's football, then you can find her details in the show notes below. If you want to keep in contact with us, then you can follow us at Honest Football Free on Twitter. We are also on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Eleanor, thanks so much for obviously being here, particularly with everything that's going on and busy schedules and stuff like that. I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So, obviously, to introduce you as we did already, but to go into a bit more detail, obviously you work in football now in terms of the sort of bit of journalism and broadcasting and that. But before we talk about that, we want to sort of go back to the beginning of that journey for you. So, can you tell me about your first sort of football experience? It might have been you playing, watching, could have been on the TV. Where did football as a love begin for you?
So right back in childhood, I was kind of introduced to it early. My dad's a huge Liverpool fan.
Right.
We always get eyebrows raised because obviously we're southern and we're like 3 hours away from Liverpool. But my dad's a massive Liverpool fan. His dad was a massive Liverpool fan. Right. It kind of stemmed from that. And I don't think I've got one younger brother, and I don't think my dad ever expected to have his daughter and his son involved in football. I think he always just assumed that he'd have his son, my brother. But then I don't even know how I fell into it. I think it's just football was always on the TV.
Yeah.
And I just got involved. I just loved it. And I kind of went along and I had my Liverpool shirt and I'd like watching games, but it wasn't until it's really, really kind of cliche and as a Liverpool fan, but I was 8 years old for Istanbul.
Right.
So for the Champions League final. And I remember watching that season. That's kind of like my earliest memory of football. Yeah. And we were on holiday in Spain for the final. Right. And I just remember we found a bar full of Scousers, full of Liverpool fans. And there was 8-year-old me, young brother's gone to bed type thing. Me and dad stayed out to watch it. And that was like my earliest kind of memory of football and just falling in love with it. And I always tell people Liverpool came first and then the rest of football came, if that makes sense. So I mean,
it's an incredible introduction, that final. Of all the games, first game I ever went to was a 1-1 draw on a Monday night, so it's not quite the same as Champions League final of that magnitude. But
to watch that was just incredible. So, and then obviously the years came as a Liverpool fan, so everything's trying to top that. It's like, it's not really working. But no, that was when I had my first taste of it, and then I did try and get involved with playing. Again, kind of every woman my age just chucked in a group of boys. You're the only girl there. I didn't really enjoy it. I never really found the love for playing it. And so as years went on, I was always just this weird, massive Liverpool fan growing up. I think that's probably what people I went to school with remember it as the Liverpool fan. And then I decided, I really like writing, I like language, I love media. Why not try and combine this and make something of it? But if it wasn't for perhaps Rafa Benitez and Liverpool in 2005, then I might not be here today.
Yeah, it's true, actually. I think sometimes people sort of, it's almost like, is it osmosis, is that the right word? But where if you're constantly surrounded by it, you can't help but sort of fall in love with it, I suppose. So I suppose the following year then after Istanbul was obviously the FA Cup final against West Ham, who I supported, happened to be there at Cardiff and had an amazing day for 85 minutes, and then the whole thing sort of fell apart in the last 5 minutes. But anyway, that aside. But yeah, do you know, I think that was such a successful period. I think if you'd have gone back maybe 5 or 10 years before that, obviously being a Liverpool fan was probably a bit less glamorous than what it was then. But I think that it's important, I think, for people like yourself to get in there that you were a Liverpool fan before Jurgen Klopp. So I imagine nowadays, especially through teaching, I find that there's a lot of Liverpool fans that have suddenly sprung up, in recent years.
So weird. The past couple of, I'd say the past 2 years, I've had people, especially because you say you're a Liverpool fan, and when you've got an accent like mine and yours, they're like, are you? And I've had like the word glory supporter thrown at me, and I'm thinking, hold on, just hold on a minute. I grew up with Roy Hodgson and no disrespect.
No, it's true. No,
like great as a Liverpool fan. So it's really weird. I mean, I absolutely love Klopp. I love what he's done with the team. It's at the minute, we're like on cloud 9 until all this happens. But I do have to remind people, like, hold on, I was there through some of the rougher periods.
Say, I suppose post Benitez, you had, what was it, that Voronin, people like that playing up front, so it can change, you know what I mean? You have been through the lows as well of stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not always been kind of like top of the league. And I think people have short memories. I grew up around everyone I went to school with was either an Arsenal fan or a Man United fan, because that was the time. It was the time that you kind of had like Wenger in charge and Ferguson that was going mad. And so I didn't really know any other Liverpool fans apart from a couple of people at my school, and everyone would be like, well, I'm 7th, 8th in the table. I'm not like...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Struggling to make Europe, you know what I mean? So it's from now European champions. I suppose, but I think that's the beauty of being a football supporter is, unless you maybe follow maybe a Barcelona or something like that, actually a proper football fan, you know, you do go through those highs and lows. And I think sometimes people forget about that, don't they? And actually, you know, maybe if you support a club a bit like West Ham, more in the sense of staving off relegation as a success. But, you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing, though, isn't it? That it's not all the glory days that you sort of see. So I think that's...
No, it is. I think that's why I was so drawn to it as well. Like I like really connect with like the emotional side of football, and I'm not someone really to sit there and kind of analyze and pull apart stats, even though that's a big part of kind of punditry and match reports and what I do. I've always been the emotional side of it, and the fans and the culture surrounded the club. That's probably because I'm a Liverpool fan as well, because it's Liverpool just one of those clubs. I mean, we're not the only club, and I know a lot of people dress it up, but Liverpool are one of those clubs that just has that kind of culture surrounding it. But much like West Ham, I think West Ham, if you look at the teams in London, if you compare them to some of the, I don't want to say better teams in London.
No, it's true. No, it's true.
You compare them to your Chelseas and your Tottenhams, but West Ham have that culture, and they've got that fan kind of rallying around even when times are tough. And so the culture and the emotion of football is something I'm really into as well. Yeah,
I completely agree with you. And I think no matter, unless West Ham were playing Liverpool, I always found like you say, the whole tradition that goes with Liverpool, I think is fantastic. You know, the scarves, the songs. And one thing that I think was amazing, and I'm you know, so gutted that we as a club never did it, was when, you know, the ground needed renovating, they just sort of built where it was and built upwards. Whereas, I mean, the culture of West Ham is still there, but I had a season ticket for a year at the Olympic Stadium, and it is compared to Upton Park, because my dad had a season ticket there for years and I used to go along with him, it's a very, very different experience. And it does dilute that, you know, that culture that you're talking about. So that's one thing, you know, I think Liverpool did so well, was to hold on to that and keep the community involved and all that sort of thing. Because I don't know if you've been to the Olympic Stadium, but it literally is in the middle of nowhere, you know, in the sense of...
Yeah, it's really funny that you're a West Ham fan, because my boyfriend's actually a West Ham fan. And so he was exactly the same. He had a season ticket at Upton Park.
Yes.
And then he changed it over to the Olympic Stadium. And I've been a couple of times with him, and I've bit my tongue, obviously. I've kind of had to just sit there, but I'm just thinking, this is so different compared to Anfield.
And that's the thing, Well, I'll be honest, a really quick side note, I know we're hearing from you, but when I had a season ticket, there was one game where, I think it was Burnley on a Tuesday night. It was the most drab sort of Premier League game you were going to watch. And the lads who normally sat in front of me, these other blokes in suits came in. And I sort of spoke to him and said, "Oh, you know, what's the plan with all of this? You know, it's, you know, suited and booted at a West Ham game on a Tuesday night." Yeah. And they were saying, "Oh no, we're just showing clients around from the city, sort of Canary Wharf." And I thought, of all the clubs in London to do that with, you know, West Ham just isn't that sort of club. But it's happening more and more. And I think I do fear for some other clubs, not just, you know, West Ham, but other clubs are starting to sell themselves a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And it's where you draw the line. You've got to be so careful with that, haven't you? But,
so it's so commercial, and it just dilutes it. It's not why I started watching the game. It's not why, and I know it won't be why you started watching the game. So it's no, it's a shame. It's just one of them things, isn't it? That with more money or more, do you know, it was just always going to happen. But
oh no, totally.
Don't get there.
no, exactly. No. Anyway, back to you, Eleanor. So, moving on, you said about, sorry, we're getting a complete tangent there, but that's good.
Oh, it's okay.
So you obviously said about sort of growing up with football, and I know that I think saying recently with women's football's probably been a lot more professionalised, and even from, I've spoken to a few, we spoke to a few sort of professional women's players, and they said in the early days it was a similar experience to yours, where you were sort of just, you know, be you and 9 other blokes, you know, boys, at school, and it's like, right, sort of sink or swim, really. I think we've come a long way from that. But in terms of your journey then, so, the playing side wasn't something that you necessarily as interested in as the sort of media and the broadcasting and journalism. So sort of just tell us a little bit more about, you know, how you got into that and what you do now on a sort of daily basis with regards to your sort of job and football, really.
So I'm really still early in my career. I've only kind of been out of university for coming up for a year. But it's a really, really strange story how I decided I wanted to go into broadcasting.
Right.
If we've got time.
No, of course, take your time. No, you're grand.
It's really, so I went through a period when Torres came to Liverpool, I went through a period where I was just obsessed with the Spanish national team. I'd never really felt that connection with the English national team, and it was that time where Spain were winning the World Cup, and I just loved watching them. And so Iker Casillas's wife she's a broadcaster in Spain. Her name's Sarah Carbonero, I think. I don't want to say that wrong. And I just became a little bit of a fangirl over her, and I just thought she was the first person I ever saw doing what I wanted to do, if that makes sense. And then you've got like your Gabby Logans and your Jackie Obi. But it was really weird. I always think back to that. It was kind of my watching the Spanish national team, and then I discovered that she kind of went to their games, and I was like, that's so cool. Like, I want to do that. She basically gets paid to watch football.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so it just went from that, really. I never really had the idea to go into journalism all throughout my schooling life. I did musical theatre. I trained in musical theatre.
Right. That's a bit of a left turn then, isn't it, from there to where you are now? Like
really, really different. I've always sung. I've always performed. But I decided that I didn't really want to do that as a career path. It's not saying journalism is easy. It's not at all. But in musical theatre, you really do sink or swim. There's
right.
A lot of the time, even if you go to study, you don't end up doing it. So I just knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, what can I do? A bit of that, and a bit of football, and a bit of languages and stuff. And I just had like a teacher say to me one day, well, why don't you look into journalism? And then I was like, oh, actually, yeah, because I like her and she does this, and I love football. And so then I went to uni to study broadcast journalism. 3 years later, I'm here, and now I'm freelancing at Sky Sports News and Giving Sport Women as well. So I'm working within men's and women's football, which is something I've really wanted to make sure I did, because I love men's football, and men's football is the reason I'm here today, why I'm a football fan. But I'm really passionate about like the equality, like gender equality, and just making sure we've got a level playing field. So I'm quite glad that I feel quite lucky that I've got the opportunity to work between both sports, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense.
So yeah, that's where I'm at the minute. I'm just kind of, I mean, everything's dried up at the minute because obviously no football, no work. It's quite hard. I think a lot of other people are in the same situation.
Well, that was my sort of next thing then, about the sort of freelancing part, where, you know, was that a choice of yours in the sense of, I'm not prying in terms of personal stuff, but, you know, could you have stayed with the one company, for example, Sky Sports? I don't know how necessarily the process works, but was that your sort of choice, really?
I'd never really thought about it at uni. You don't really get told that that's a possibility, and I just didn't realise that freelancing was there. And so whilst I was at uni, I did quite a bit of work experience at Sky, and same as everyone else, really, you stay in touch and you beg them to have you back. And they told me that they had some freelance production junior roles going, which production junior is basically a glamorized runner.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they say production junior, but you're basically running. And so I went for that, and I got that job, and that was only on a freelance basis. And so I was almost forced into it, but I'm so glad I was, because I don't know if I would have had the opportunities that I'd have had, if that makes sense. I don't know if I would have been able to do as much as I've done in such little time if I'd have just been stuck if I was a full-time production junior and doing that all the time. So I kind of had Sky going on that side, simply being a runner at Sky, working on things like Soccer Saturday, fetching drinks, just bits and bobs like that. And then I saw that Give Me Sport had launched their female platform, and they had broadcaster and journalist Benny Bonsu heading that. And it was as simple as she put a tweet out looking for women that wanted mentoring in women's sports. And I thought, that sounds really good. She invited me along to the meeting. Next thing I know, I'm writing and reporting for her.
Yeah.
And then from then, I've just kind of got as many things under my belt as possible. I've then moved over to Sky Sports News and started working on their planning team. So I've just kept going. Yeah. And just, if that makes sense, I've just gathered things.
Complete sense, yeah.
I don't really know how I've done it, but
I think you need to, though, don't you? You know, maybe I'm coming from a bit more of an institutionalized background of being a teacher where everything's laid out and set out for you. Whereas I suppose for yourself, if you don't do that, you're not going to necessarily get where you want to be, I suppose, are you, in that sense? If you don't keep pushing and sort of that kind of thing, really. So, yeah.
It's just, I've probably annoyed so many people just sending them my CV. Well, you have a look at this, can you read this? But it's just the past year has been really crazy. I've had absolutely no structure to my weeks whatsoever. Some weeks I've been working loads of hours, the next week some working from home or doing nothing. So it's been a bit mad, but yeah. I've now got this period where not much is going on, so I suppose I can sit and reflect.
Well, that was going to be one of our sort of next questions later on, but we'll go on to that now, actually. In terms of this, you know, obviously the situation is going on with the, you know, lockdown, for want of a better phrase. I think there has to be a better word for it than that, but anyway.
I know, it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. What are you sort of doing now in terms of that? Because I suppose that's, you're the first person from the media that we've ever actually had on this sort of podcast. So in terms of the, you know, I'm not saying you need to be, you know, revealing the magician's secrets, but what are you doing in these sort of periods? Are you still writing? Are you still, and if so, where are you getting that sort of inspiration from, I suppose? Because there's literally no football, is there? Or, well, I think there's some in Belarus, but we'll sort of skip over that. But do you know what I mean?
Belarus is the only country, yeah.
Yeah.
So up until about a couple of weeks ago, I was still working from home for Sky Sports News and still doing some bits for Give Me Sport. But I think a lot of, not just media, a lot of workplaces, it kind of just dried up. And one of the things about being freelance, obviously, you don't have as much job security.
Yes,
so
of course.
They can say, like lots of places where I've worked have had to kind of drop back to like a skeleton type staff where they've had hardly anyone. I'm lucky in the fact that because I'm working for Sky, even though I'm freelance, they're still supporting me financially.
Oh, okay,
which is
brilliant.
something I'm really grateful of. They haven't decided to furlough, but I've still got support there. But in terms of, so at the moment, this week I've actually had nothing to do in terms of sport journalism.
Right. Oh no.
I know, which is awful. But the kind of weeks coming, like last week and a few weeks before, when I was still doing some work for Sky, it was just a case of our jobs changed a little bit. Who can we get on? Who can we talk to? Who's doing what on? I found social media so useful for that. Like doing who can we speak to? And it was the same for Give Me Sport Women, really. We kind of reached out to our audience. We were like, well, what would we want to read right now? Yeah. And it was more, instead of looking at athletes and what they're doing, it was kind of, we tailored our content towards the reader. So how to keep fit in lockdown and things like that. And then it's just, I think it's just been a case of, for a lot of brands as well, getting who they can together and just, I mean, social media is a godsend for Instagram lives and things like that. But yeah, it's, well, my job recently has almost been with all the brands I've been working with, like a guest booker. It's like, who can we get to come on and talk to?
So it's quite ironic you're on here then, isn't it, in that sense? I suppose it's the other side of it, but yeah.
What I've been doing.
I don't know how you do it, but anyway, go on.
It's just been a case of, like I said, for all of the brands, just seeing who can come on, who can talk to, who's got a bit of a different aspect of what they're doing in lockdown. I suppose now is one of the times that we can like get to know behind the athlete, because so many times you see just these teams and these athletes and you just ask them, oh, how did you think you played? What are you doing next? But now it's like, well, you've got nothing next, so let's get to know you a bit more, which has been interesting. But yeah, so work has it's slowly drying up, but I don't know when football's going to be back, but I'm hoping soon.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, even just for the enjoyment, let alone the fact that it's obviously your livelihood. Just moving on into the whole Give Me Sport. So I suppose the obvious thing would be to talk about Sky Sports, but actually we're, our podcast, we try and look beyond sort of big things that people would already know a lot about and actually shed some light on sort of other parts of the game. So we I wouldn't say we are specialists in women's football, but we've interviewed a few people, and my sister used to play football for Luton Town, etc. So we sort of have an understanding of more so than probably other podcasts. But in terms of your role in women's football, how does that, so what are you doing? And I suppose in that sense, obviously the game has jumped so quickly, hasn't it, in terms of maybe what it was 5 or 10 years ago. For example, I mean, in terms of watching women's football, I remember, I think it used to be maybe the FA Cup final and a few internationals would be on TV or maybe terrestrial TV. But whereas now, obviously, there's so many different ways of watching it, so many different platforms. So, sorry, that was a very long-winded question. I suppose what I'm asking you is sort of what are you doing at the minute in that sense, in terms of your writing at Give Me Sport and stuff like that for the women's game?
So at Give Me Sport, I'm one of the senior writers in the football team. So we're quite a small team, but over the course, going back to before Corona took over.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So we would kind of it would just be a case of, we've got our football lead writer, Courtney, who would kind of look at the week and say, okay, so what games we've got coming up at the weekend. And I think we were one of the only outlets out there offering a full kind of overview. You've got your preview for the weekend, then your match reports, then what's gone on, and then interviews as well. I think like Anna Kessel and her team at Telegraph Sport do that as well. But then we were kind of, there's not, even though the game's grown so much, there's still not as many outlets, I don't think. So,
of course, yeah, no, completely agree, yeah.
It was something that we were really pushing, and it was just a case of things like, I could be doing anything from, like I said, like a Conti Cup preview, or heading to the press conferences for Women's Football Weekend, or then going to some of the games and getting some, I suppose that's the beauty of women's football. It's so different to men's in the fact that you've got so much more access.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually, yeah. Do you notice a difference between the two in terms of how you can do that? Yeah, you've got sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just a case of, it's really, really weird. Like at the end of a game, a women's game, you can just go up with your own microphone, and if you can grab them for 2 minutes and they're happy to speak to you, then they're happy to speak to you. And I sometimes think, I just can't imagine doing this, like getting Mo Salah over and it's crazy. But so the access is really different. I suppose that's one of the good things about women's football at the minute. We can all grow such organic content.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, prior to this all happening, that's what we were doing at Give Me Sport. And now this is kind of come into place. We've been seeing if we can get some of the female players to do like things like Instagram takeovers, so we can a day in the life of, because it's quite interesting to see, because obviously they don't have home gyms like a Premier League footballer might have. So a bit of everything really at Give Me Sport. We're just trying to push as much organic content as we possibly can. It's quite refreshing, like I said, the Telegraph and us to have a whole platform dedicated to women's sports. I hope kind of once this is all gone and we look to the future, I'm hoping to see more, because if you look at the tabloids, each tabloid has maybe got like one women's sport writer, and it's just not doable really if you want to cover it as a whole. So it's just there's nothing wrong with that at the minute, because there hasn't been scope to hire. I mean, some tabloids would argue there hasn't been scope to hire more than one football writer, but now it's like you said, it's growing into such a huge thing. It's a case of, we need more people to talk and write about women's football now, because they can't possibly cover as much as going on. But
no, and I feel like they almost I think the game deserves that as well, you know, for the I suppose, I don't want to say it sounds patronising, I don't mean that, but for the effort and the, you know, the lengths that people are going to raise the profile of the game, I think it deserves that, you know, then that coverage that goes with it. I do agree with you. I think obviously maybe the elite level of the men's game has got so untouchable that it's very difficult. You would know a lot better than me, but you know, it's very difficult to sort of get any sort of anything that isn't a standard answer from a press conference. Almost, it feels a bit like, isn't it? So I think as football fans, maybe that's what we crave, or say as proper football fans, maybe that's what we crave, is a bit more honesty and a bit more, you know, what's the word? I think organic is probably the best word for it, I suppose. So the women's game, I think it could fill that void. And I don't know what you think, but the success, obviously, of the World Cup and that, you know, the performance in the World Cup, sort of being capitalised on. I don't know if you feel like maybe we could have done more as a nation to maybe sort of jumped off the back of that, if that makes sense.
I think it was like a groundbreaking moment, the World Cup last year. But I do think, what the issue with it is it was almost hyped up so much.
Yeah.
Like rightly so. And then it's trying to, you know, when you just can't even put into words how you feel.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's trying to maintain that level of hype almost.
Yes.
So once it's always post-tournament, and then there's a drop-off, and then the Women's Super League season starts again, and the attendances aren't there.
No.
And it's trying to bridge that gap between, because the World Cup was great, and there were some great performances. I still think England have got, in terms of technicality in the actual team, I still think there's loads of work to do there.
Yes, yeah.
But in terms of rallying around the team, and creating a kind of interest in the UK, I think we did that, but I don't think we know how to maintain that interest yet and to convert it over to the league.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to take. I think a lot more support, a lot more backing, a lot more funding. It almost felt like we're halfway there, but we're nowhere. We're not there yet. That's how it felt to me.
I know what you mean. I do think it's I think sometimes we're almost, without meaning to, it's almost ingrained into us that the women's game, it should be sort of secondary, and I don't think that's the case. And sorry, I don't think that should be the case, but it feels like because of when it's played on a Sunday afternoon, when you're then asking them to compete with, for example, Man United Liverpool, which invariably is most likely to be a Super Sunday game in terms of the men's game, and then you're saying, you could go to, and they sort of I think it's really, if we really want to progress maybe the national team and women's football, I suppose we've got to give women's football its own space rather than trying to compete. And I suppose what I mean by that is it's like the stadiums, for example. I don't understand, especially the elite level. For example, just take Man City. Why can't the women's team play out of their, Etihad? There's no way that pitch is going to get ruined. You think how much money is spent on that? I recently, so I spoke to someone who plays for Stevenage ladies, who aren't in the Women's Super League, but and she was saying she still has to pay to play unless she gets a sponsor. And, the kits were hand-me-downs from the men's team. And I just sort of feel like, what are we saying and what image are we giving to the game? We're all to sort of jump on the national team and say, brilliant, the World Cup. Actually, if we're still doing things like that, and I say we as a football, organisation, if we're still doing things like that, are we really encouraging the growth of the game or not? The stadium thing still bugs me. I don't know why you can't play them. There was obviously, when they played England games at Wembley, thousands of people went. I don't understand why that won't happen, but
it's because I think there's still a group of people that just believe that there aren't fans of women's football, and I think we're over that. But there's still people that's ingrained in them. But I think we're over that now.
Yeah.
What the stadium thing that bugs me is how far away some of their stadiums are from the city centre, and then they ask fans, well, can you go out and support your like your local women's team, even if it is your local women's Super League team? But some of them are 20 mile from a city centre, and the public transport links are awful.
On a Sunday again, on
a Sunday, nothing's going. So it's just, even though we're asking the standard person, kind of like me and you, to go out and watch women's football, and we're happy to, it's almost like the foundations aren't in place to help us make that happen. Yeah, and that strips all the way back to funding and associations and support systems like that, instead of just, I think it's far too lazy to just say, the fans aren't going to watch it, because there's fans out there that want to go and watch it. And I think there's so many building blocks that need to be put in place before we're going to be where we need to be. Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think it is, there's some initiatives I know that, a lot of Premier League clubs, as been well documented, probably can operate on an empty stadium as such. So, I know there's been the odd time where if you have a match ticket for the men's team on a Saturday, that either gives you discounted or, a certain free entry, say, for the women's team on the Sunday. Maybe things like that help, but it's that longevity, isn't it? But I didn't bring you on here, sorry, to start sort of being on. I didn't mean to bring you.
Talk for hours about it, so please cut.
No. What I mean is I didn't mean for you to sort of just focus on the negative aspects that we've just spoken about, which are all valid. But in terms of the, before we move on to your favourite game, in terms of maybe from your position, how do you think the game can develop for the better? And what I mean is like, obviously there's people like you out there and who you're writing for. Does it need a little bit more than that, I suppose, in that sense?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because there are a set of people who unfortunately just aren't going to have their opinion changed on women's football, and we don't really need to focus on that. You can go on Twitter, and whenever Sky or BT or someone tweets something about a women's team, even if you look through the replies, there's always something negative. So it's kind of it's really hard to just turn a blind eye to those people, but in the back of your head, there's always people that aren't going to have their opinions changed. But I think a big thing for me is I was Liverpool and then I was football, because I had that connection with the team. And I can hold my hands up and say I don't have that connection with the Liverpool women's team, because throughout my childhood, I didn't see enough of them. I didn't know much about the players, obviously up until the past couple of years, where I've kind of done my bit and gone out there to search for it. But unless you're going out there to search for it, or unless you kind of know the top England players like Steph Houghton and Beth England and people like that, you don't know you don't really know the foundations to the actual team, and therefore I think it's then really hard to build a support.
Right.
Like a fan base.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because you don't really know enough about the team, and so
yeah,
a lot of people you do get the football fans who just watch football because they love football, and you get a lot of them, but more like 9 times out of 10, I think you get the passionate football fan who is passionate about their team, and I think that's what we need to try and develop in the women's team, and that's our responsibility as the media, to put players out there so people know more about them.
Yeah.
The club's responsibility to kind of put their players on show and use social media, and I think it's just a case of like, I think we need to remember we were banned from the sport for 50 years. We couldn't do anything, and we're still building. And I think we need to. For me, it's not about the technicality or are men better at football than women, because people will watch football if they're passionate about it and
exactly.
feel that connection. And so it's just building that emotion again. And I think that's something that needs to be pushed within the women's game. People need to be actual fans. People want to, do you know what I mean?
Instead completely.
You'd get it with and you are getting it now, because you go to, Man City have got, the Man City women's support is incredible. As Arsenal, United, like, they've got really, really passionate fans, but we just need to multiply that by 10, by 100. As soon as people start learning about the teams and knowing more about the teams, I think that will come. I think we've just got to put that support system in place to help produce that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, completely. If you don't mind me asking a more slightly personal question, do you think that there's a responsibility on you and your actual organisation, Give Me Sport, because you're one of the forefront, and maybe pioneer is probably the more crass words here, I don't mean like that, but do you feel like, as a senior writer, particularly on a personal level, is there more responsibility for you to keep being that driving force to do what you just spoke about?
Yeah, hugely, because I think if we're not going to do it, who is?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a case of, if we're not here doing it, then who is? And obviously, like I said, more broadcasters and more tabloids do need to kind of hire more writers, but us focusing on women's sport, I think it's a huge responsibility, and we need to be there because if where else are fans going to get content? Where else are fans going to learn about their teams? And so if we're not doing it, and teams that like Telegraph, their women's sport, if they're not doing it, then no one else is. So I think it's media and the club. I think they almost need to work, even though sometimes you don't think about football clubs and media working together. Almost they should stay apart, but they need to work together, because otherwise it's not about raising the profile anymore, because people know it's there. It's just about, I think it's that emotion, and it's that kind of connection with the club, or just connection with players in a sport, because that is what draws people back. In my opinion, that's what draws people back.
No, I completely agree. I think you've articulated that so well. So I think it's probably the best way to maybe sort of sum up that part of the interview in that sense. But I think it just, I suppose I wasn't trying to make you feel like you had pressure on you to be this sort of pioneer of what's going on. But I think, I congratulate you for being bold enough to sort of be part of that. Because I suppose once you'd come out of university, you could have easily maybe followed the path of other broadcasters and journalists, and maybe the cash cow that is the men's game, almost, for the want of a better phrase. So I think you and your team should be commended for sort of the work that you're doing, really, in that sense. But moving on to the title of the episode, this quite often happens when I do these interviews, where sort of get you to talk about your favourite game and spend most of it talking about you the person, which is brilliant. But we've got plenty of time, so go into as much detail as you want. But the whole point of the series really is what is your favourite ever football match? So you can go into emotions, before game, after game, entirely up to you. Whatever your favourite football game was and why.
See, I was thinking about this just before I got my laptop out, and I thought, you know what? I haven't actually given any thought into what my favourite game.
You don't need to. I think that's the beauty of it, football.
Yeah, that is the beauty of it. But obviously, it's Liverpool, and I'm lucky enough to get to some Liverpool games, and I almost want to choose a Liverpool game that I've been to. But even though there's so many that stick out to me, I cannot, and I know it's so recent, but I cannot shake Barcelona at home from last year.
Of course. Well, it was an incredible game, wasn't it?
It was just, that has to be, obviously, if I'm I would say like Istanbul and things like that, but if I'm talking about Liverpool at the moment, how it makes me feel, that's probably one of the most recent games that's almost brought that feeling back to me, because Klopp has taken us on such a journey, and he's been brilliant, and we've been so close, and it's almost like we haven't had that feeling, but then that Barcelona game just summed it up. So I was still at uni and I went out with a big group to watch the first leg. Like as you do, to the pub, Liverpool shirt on, everything. I just sat there and thought, I can't take this. I just can't take it because no one else there was a Liverpool fan.
And everyone, I'll be honest, you know, as a neutral, not neutral, but do you know what I mean? Everyone thought they were dead and buried, you know, by the end of that game, you know, completely.
I know, and I've just got all the lads and they're like, oh, look at Messi and look at this. And I'm thinking, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. So I have to admit, I thought, like you said, I thought that was it. I thought, right, that's it. Okay. Like semis will do us. We'll go again next year. That was in my head. And so I thought everyone was then going out to watch the second leg, and I said, no, I'm not doing it. I can't deal with it. I just can't deal with it.
No.
Especially when everyone's had a couple of drinks and people like to wind you up and everything like that. So I thought, I'll stay at home. I'll watch it because I'm at uni, so I haven't even got telly. I'll watch it on my
Gosh, I remember those days. Yeah, go on.
So I was just sat in my living room on my own in my damp, dingy student house. And I thought, this will do. If I'm going to go out, we'll go out in style. I'll just go to bed straight after.
Yeah.
And then the first goal went in, and I thought, I'm usually quite optimistic when it comes to, but there was nothing there that I thought, there's no way we're doing this. And I just thought, I can't be bothered to get my hopes up because then I'll have a rubbish night and I'll just be in a But just the way, and I watched I haven't actually watched the full game since. I watched the highlights a little bit earlier in the week, and I thought, I've got to sit down and watch this game again. That's going to be my one lockdown thing to do. But I can't. All I just remember, I just sat there in silence, and I never really do that with football. I'm usually quite random in that. But I think that's why the game stuck with me.
I'll be honest, even as not, you know, someone who wasn't in, you know, obviously as emotionally invested as you, I even felt a little bit exhausted after watching it because it was such an emotional roller coaster. Whether you were a Liverpool fan or not, you know, there was so much. I think it wasn't just the fact of obviously a comeback of that magnitude. I think it was, you know, who it was against and what was at stake, obviously, for the winner of the tie. You know, I felt exhausted afterwards. So goodness knows how you probably felt, or obviously the Liverpool players as well. But you know what I mean? It's
maybe, just. But I felt like all the odds are against us because obviously there was no Salah, and he wasn't playing. Not saying that he carries us at all, but
he's such an influential player, isn't he?
He's such a star player that you think, well, if you're going in a semi-final against Barcelona, then he's on your team sheet. But I just, it was when the third goal went in, and it was almost a bit like I think I just froze, and I thought it's just still not going to happen. Like I still didn't believe it then.
No.
But it was just I will just never forget the Trent corner. I've just never seen anything like it.
Incredible.
I will never see anything like it again. And it was just like the bit of commentary stuck with me. And I think that's why it's just one of my favourite games at the minute, because the absolute elation, like I'd be lying if I said I didn't cry. Like it was just it had been so long since I'd ever felt like that after a football match. Like obviously like before that we had great times with Klopp, but nothing to that magnitude. And it was almost reminiscent of when I remember first watching Liverpool in Istanbul, like another superb comeback.
Exactly.
So, and it's just after, and then as soon as the goal went in, I mean, my phone was like pinging. Like everyone ringing me like, well, you've got to come out tonight and you've got to do this. I'm like, hold on, we haven't won it yet, because all I kept thinking was Barcelona score one more goal and that's it, we're back to square one.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think that just highlights the power of football, doesn't it? In the sense of the not obviously your media outlets or anything like that, but you know, sometimes in other parts of the media can be lost. It becomes quite statistical, doesn't it? It becomes quite, you know, just matter of fact. And actually, I think, when, you know, not saying we are, but it's important to hold on to that part of the game, that, you know, the emotions, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with football making you cry, whether it's good or bad, you know, and I think we got to be careful we don't lose that, I suppose, is what I'm saying. That emotion that you maybe felt then.
I think that's the one, and I think that's what in my job and in broadcasting stuff, I always want to make sure that element is still there. Like I said, you can get great news angles, and you can get great stories if you kind of break down all the statistics and look at what's going on. But I don't think it's anything without that background of emotion and without that connection. I mean, like I said, there's people out there that just watch football because they love football, and I get that. I don't think I could ever be one of those people that doesn't have connection to the club, no matter what the club is. I mean, you're playing with West Ham or, but yeah, I always like And that's one thing, like I said, that's one thing that I think will elevate the women's game to the next level. Just, I think that's why people come back and watch more, because it's addictive.
Yeah.
It's like the lows are really bad, but the highs are great. And you can't stop watching because you know that the possibility of that's there. So that's the big thing for me, I think. The big takeaway of it all.
No, I was about to say, I think that's beautifully rounded off the interview, to be honest, in that sense, because I think what you were saying, that passion, that obviously comes across in your work as well. So, you know, I think we need more people like you in the game, to be honest. I'm not saying there isn't, but, you know, more people who come with that mindset, you know, who see it as a bit more than just a sport. So it just leads me to say, you know, thank you so much, Eleanor, for doing this. You know, I appreciate you giving up your time and doing all of that for us. So yeah, if just before we go, if people want to sort of keep in touch with you professionally, and you know, where can they find you? You know, I'll put it in the show notes and stuff. But you know,
yeah, no, that's okay. So my Twitter and my Instagram are basically each other back to front. So my Twitter is Eleanor Lee _, and my Instagram is _Eleanor Lee.
Right.
That's probably the best place. I mean, social media is such a great media is the new link, like Twitter is the new LinkedIn for me. I just always think that if people want to connect with me, do it on there. I think you can find so many stories and so amazing people. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eleanor. That was absolutely amazing. I really appreciate you giving up your time for us.
No, thank you for having me. Cheers.